What I want to basically tell you is what the legacy of Zoroastrianism. We talked about that the last time. The legacy of Zoroastrianism is going to be the first attempt by organized religion to deal with philosophical issues. Okay? And it'll be the first to attach moral behavior to a person's status in an afterlife. So this is a faith that gives us the idea of heaven and hell, a final judgment, and also the idea of a Messiah, the deliverer, that will set things right at the end of time. For the Jews, it's a Mashiach, the Messiah, but that notion comes out of the Sushion, which you'll see on your Zoroastrianism definitions list. Forgive me, I rattled it off over the top of my head, and therefore it's not in alphabetical order, but it's all good. Okay, better something than nothing. Also, what's interesting too about Zoroaster is that he has women as being equal to men before Ahura Mazda. They have the same hope of salvation. And this is unusual because women generally did not have high status in Iranian society back then. There's a reason for that. Because it's a warrior society. War is primarily a male pastime. I'll be with you in 1 second, Kenny. Outside of Sparta, which is an anomaly, generally speaking, the more militaristic a society is, the lower the status of women tends to be. Think of feudal Japan, that's a classic example. Okay? Kenny had a question or comment?
Yeah. Do historians believe the rational
certain ideas in Judaism. Judaism, in effect, will also come up with the notion of monotheism. Of course, they don't have the kind of bifurcated setup that the Messianic faiths like Zoroastrianism has. And there is a high moral ethic in Judaism, the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments. These are lofty moral precepts, but in the original, in the Torah, the 5 books of the Old Testament, the 5 books of Moses, basically there is no mention of a defined afterlife or final judgment. That notion is brought with the Jews from Babylon after they had been basically sequestered there forcibly by King Nebuchadnezzar in 587, 586 BC with the destruction of the first temple. It's going to actually be the Persians that will influence Jews when they're in Babylon. They'll come into contact with Zoroastrians and actually come back and rebuild the temple with help from the Persians themselves. If you read the books of the Old Testament prophets Ezra and Nehemiah, they praise the Persians to the skies because the Assyrians before them and the Chaldean Babylonians before them basically were responsible for invading the Jewish state and taking Jews out of their country and bringing them somewhere else, relocating them. And basically the Persians will allow the Jews to repopulate the area that would be known as Judea, Judah, and basically rebuild the temple that had been destroyed by the Chaldean Babylonians. So the Persians actually get a good press in the Old Testament. We could talk about Esther another time. Okay? Now, basically at the age of 40, Zoroaster makes his first convert. And this is going to be his cousin Medyoma.
Can you spell that?
I think I might have written it down for you over here. Yes, I did. If you take out your Zoroastrian terminology list and you go slightly below the middle, under Sushian, you'll see Medyoma. That's going to be Zoroaster's cousin and his first convert. In certain ways, this is kind of similar if you're familiar with the career of the prophet Muhammad, of course, where he's going to basically make converts of Khadijah. Yes?
Ali was from school.
That's right. Ali is cousin and son. That's right. Very good. That's right. That's very similar. Okay, yes, sir.
It seems like this market is a very early one person. Is there anything that you use which tends to start to end hundreds of thousands? It takes one convert, whereas this was the whole nation at the same time. Anything else like that?
Yeah. Where people basically adopt a faith en masse, Simeon?
Yeah.
Yeah. Generally speaking, remember too that the Jews, the Shinto in Japan, and also the Hindus, or as they call Brahmanism, they all have certain things in common, even though they're not apparent right away. You're thinking, what does Japan, Israel, and India have in common right off the bat? Well, their religions are all what they call ethnic religions, or religions of locale, which means that these people tend to identify their religion with their ethnicity. Okay? Universal faiths are faiths which basically connect converts to people outside of the border and the ethnic group. Okay? Remember that the Jews were tribalistic. And basically, you could talk about Abraham being, the father of the Jews, even though technically speaking, of course, he's really not, quote-unquote, Jewish. I would think that, the Jews would probably begin more with the 12 tribes, the progeny of Jacob, who is called Israel. But what Abraham is going to do is he's going to make a covenant to deal with Yahweh or Jehovah, that, give me soul worship, and if you do so, you'll be my people, and I'll make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the firmament. I'll be with you 1 second, Kenny. And basically, the Jews, remember too, are related by ethnicity. If you ask basically how someone becomes Jewish, Judaism is not really a proselytizing faith. You do have people that proselytize it, but it's very rare. Basically, if you're going to be considered Jewish, most likely because you have a Jewish mother. Okay? And you want to add something, Ken? Yes, that's true. The Azteca Mexica, which were a confederation of tribes that organized in 1428 in the Valley of Mexico, also had that. But the Aztecs too were highly polytheistic. But what's going to happen is, among certain groups that believe in many gods, you're going to have what's known as henotheism. And the Jews were originally henotheistic. And what that basically means is, you believe that there are many gods, but you give soul worship to one of them. Okay? Remember in the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, thou shalt have no other God before me. Okay? God said, notice he doesn't say there are no other gods. You shall not worship any other God. You give Yahweh or Jehovah soul worship. This is true also of the so-called heretic pharaoh of the New Kingdom, Akhenaten, who basically worshipped the winged sun disk, the Aten. If you're familiar with ancient Egypt, how many of you are familiar with ancient Egyptian history? I knew it would be useful. Okay, and your Cyrus. Okay, yeah, and your son.
And so the Hindu and the Aztec.
Well, Hinduism, Shinto, Judaism are all ethnic faiths. They basically only make sense to people that are born into the faith. And usually they have an association with a holy land. For instance, the Ganges River is actually seen as a personification of the Hindu goddess Ganja. No, not the one you smoke. Okay? And being college students, I'm sure you know about that. Especially if there are some tests. But for the most part, I'm going to tell you that to a Hindu, the land of India itself is holy. To the Shinto, Mount Fujiyama is a holy mountain. Japanese soil is holy soil. For a while, there were injunctions against leaving Japan. But I don't want to go into the Tokugawa shogunate. There were Shinto precepts. When the Jews are basically forced out of the Holy Land by the Romans after the suppression of the Bar Kokhba revolt in the 130s, okay, when the Jews are basically forced out after their revolt is crushed by Hadrian in 135 AD. The diaspora, the Greek word for the scattering, begins the Jews go to the four corners of the world. But they remember the Passover Seder next year in Jerusalem. Why? Because that's a holy land. That was land that was given to them by God. So they identify themselves with the land itself. It doesn't make sense to take in outsiders. And did you know that David Ben-Gurion of course, the first Prime Minister of Israel was a busboy with Ho Chi Minh in Paris. And Ho Chi Minh basically told him that, I ever get the French out of Vietnam and I'm able to bring it back to the Vietnamese, I'll give the Jews a homeland there. Now, of course, Ben Gurion thanked him for his hospitality, but there's nothing in the Jewish Bible that talks about the Jews wandering through the tropical rainforests of Vietnam. Okay? It has relevance only to a particular holy land. Now, Zoroastrianism is a little complex. There is a type of ethnicity to it, and to this day, the Zoroastrians now are mostly a closed group. They don't marry with outsiders. But generally speaking, the message of Zoroastrianism is universal because of Hormuzd created everyone, and everyone is subject also to the temptations of the evil Lord, who of course is Ahriman. And Alexandra, you have a question coming, then we'll speak to Faisal. Today, yes. And the majority of Zoroastrians live today, not in Iran, but in India, where they're referred to as Parsis, which is the word that they're given, which really means Persians. Okay? If you're going to be one of the few Zoroastrians living in Iran today, and they do live there as a protected minority, like the Jews and the Christians, these are Zartashtis. That means Zoroastrian that's currently residing in Iran. Faisal, you have a question?
When you go to the Holy Land, the other name of India is Hindustan, the land of Hindus.
Yes, the land of the Hindus.
Yeah.
Right, sure.
When you go in Ganga,
Yes.
there is a Hindu god named Shiva, and Shiva Rat is destroyed. Shiva Rat is the night of Shiva. The Hindu priests, they actually smoke on it the whole night.
That's one of the reasons why I converted to it. You didn't hear that. No. Basically, they do have that also in various other cultic phenomena. Sure. And, of course, basically, for those, in Jamaica, Rastafarians, that basically created a divinity out of Haile Selassie, Rastafari. Okay, because the Ethiopian word for king is Ras. They also incorporate that in there, but I don't have enough hair to grow dreadlocks, so I won't be in that thing. Yes, go ahead. What's that? They do. Okay, it's good to know. Okay, so I don't have to go get Rogaine or something. Yes.
Although today Zoroastrianism isn't necessarily proselytic, or they try to proselytize?
Okay, at the beginning, Zoroaster has to get his message out there, and it's a revolutionary message. This is a message that everyone is responsible to a God of goodness who created them. And that regardless of what type of power you have in life or don't have, you're restricted by ethical boundaries. This is revolutionary, Josh. Okay, now Zoroaster's going to get his message out, and I'm going to tell you how people react to it. So this way I can answer your question. And then you'll see exactly if it's proselytizing or not.
But was his goal to convert people? Like
yes.
That he went out on a mission?
Yes, but he doesn't think about it as like, let's create a Zoroastrian church. What he's thinking about is, let me tell people the truth and see if they accept it. This is the nature of reality. And go right ahead.
The current party, you said they use fire as just a part of ritual, correct?
Part of the ritual. And I'm going to tell you, Amanda, that's sometimes that's misunderstood by people. This is a holdover from Indo-Aryan ritual. Okay? And basically there are people that see Zoroastrian fire temples, which are basically called an Atash. An Atash is a Zoroastrian fire temple. The most important is the Atash Baral, of which there are maybe about 10 in the whole world. I think. It's very limited. And they're used, the fire there is used for purification. It's not being worshipped. This is not like Indra, who's a fire deity in Hinduism. Yes?
Yeah, because I know a guy who's party, and the way he described it was like, oh, he worship fire, and I was like, okay.
He said they worship
Yeah,
fire,
because of the-
and he's Zoroastrian.
Parsi.
He should take this class. He doesn't know his own thing.
Yeah,